The Influence of Marijuana on the Physiological Processes in Exercise by Zamian X. Gynes. Medical and recreational marijuana is becoming legal in many states throughout the country. Therefore, there will be an unprecedented number of people who will be exercising and smoking marijuana during their downtime. Due to marijuana being illegal and taboo for such a long time, most people do not know the effects of marijuana on the physiological processes in exercise. Due to marijuana becoming legal, there are an increasing number of professional athletes who are consuming marijuana before and after athletic competitions. Therefore, the question is the consumption of marijuana, is it detrimental or beneficial to the physiological processes in athletic performance? What exactly are the short-term effects? The aim of this experiment will be to determine the short-term effects of marijuana consumption on an athlete's strength, agility, speed, and endurance. The major psychoactive ingredient in medical marijuana is THC and CBD. THC will not occur naturally in its active form while in the cannabis plant. In the plant, the compound is in a form known as THCA. What that means is that the chemical compound must be heated or cooked for it to be active. The effects of THC on the brain. THC produces a psychotropic effect known as the high that people feel when they consume or smoke marijuana. The chemical compounds in marijuana known as cannabinoids affect the brain by binding to the cannabinoid receptors in the brain. The receptors can be found in the basal ganglia cerebellum, which are associated with movement control. They're found in the hippocampus, which is associated with learning and memory and the control of stress. The receptors in the cerebral cortex, which is responsible for higher cognitive functions. And finally, receptors are in the spinal cord, which affect reflexes and pain modulation. Therefore, due to where the receptors are located in the brain, it's theorized that cannabinoids can affect cognitive functions, movement, reflexes, memory, and pain modulation when interacting with the brain. Effects of marijuana on the cardiovascular system. Marijuana doesn't seem to have a detrimental effect on the cardiovascular system. It does affect it though, and it increases heart rate, can increase blood pressure and dilation of blood vessels. However, marijuana does seem to be safe for people who have healthy cardiovascular systems. So I just want to emphasize that it seems to be safe for healthy people. However, people who are have health issues with the cardiovascular system should steer clear of marijuana. The similarity between smoking marijuana and cigarettes. A study in 2007 by the American Chemical Society showed that the smoke inhaled from marijuana is very similar to smoking cigarettes. Cannabis smoke has a lot of the same carcinogenic compounds that are found in cigarettes. The compounds that are in cigarettes but not found in cannabis are lead, arsenic, and nicotine. There's really no long-term studies of marijuana that are linked to lung cancer, but at the same time, that has to do with how long marijuana has been illegal in this country and many other countries. So there's a lack of long-term studies out there with regards to trying to tie the long-term effects of smoking marijuana with lung cancer. The adverse effects of smoking marijuana can be mitigated or by actually consuming marijuana instead of smoking it. Background. Many athletes are now consuming marijuana more and more every day. This is due to the fact that marijuana consumption recreationally and medicinally has been permitted in many states across this country. However, these amateur and professional sports leagues are at a crossroads right now. Should marijuana consumption still be banned, or should it be prohibited in these sports organizations? The thought process by many athletes in the league is that in the many leagues is that if it's not illegal or performance enhancing, it shouldn't be banned in athletic competitions. This experiment should verify if the consumption of marijuana has positive, adverse, or no short-term effects on athletic performance. Experiment. Introduction and hypothesis. The aim of this experiment will be to determine the short-term effects of marijuana consumption on an athlete's strength, agility, speed, and endurance. What we're going to do is we're going to pick 3 female athletes in their mid-20s who will be used for this experiment. On day 1, the athletes will be considered the control group, since they will perform 3 tests without consuming marijuana. On the second day, the athletes will consume 10 milligrams of marijuana by puffing Smart Cart cannabis oil, which is a sativa strain. Then they'll perform the same 3 tests as the day before, approximately 15 minutes after smoking the cannabis. The results from both days will be compared to see if there is an increase or decrease in each of the athletes' athletic performance. The hypothesis is that the results will confirm that performing exercise or athletic events shortly after consuming marijuana will cause adverse effects on short-term athletic performance. Experiment subjects. So here we have the 3 subjects, DC, JL, and BC. The anonymity of each of these subjects is being kept. They're all female. They have the approximate same age, approximately the same height, and approximately the same weight. Experiment procedure. As stated before, the experiment will last 2 days. 3 exercises will be performed by each athlete. They're going to be performing a strength test, an endurance test, and a speed and agility test. So for the strength test, what they're going to do is as many push-ups as possible within 60 seconds. For the endurance test, they're going to do a sitting wall squat test until exhaustion. And finally, for the speed and agility test, they must perform the figure 8 cone drill test as fast as possible. And they're only going to be allowed 1 practice run. So the speed and agility test that we're using, the figure 8 cone drill test, what we do is we have 2 cones that we space 10 meters apart, and they have to run a figure 8 around them. So as stated before, on day 1, the athletes will be considered the control group since they'll perform the test without consuming marijuana. And on day 2, the athletes will be the experimental group, and the experimental variable will be the marijuana. So on the second day, the athletes will consume 10 milligrams of marijuana by puffing Smart Cart cannabis oil, and the strain of the marijuana is sativa. Equipment needed. Shoes. The participants need comfortable shoes, need a stopwatch for time activity, you need a flat surface to perform the test, a flat wall to perform the sitting wall test, you need 2 marker cones for a figure 8 cone drill test, and you need measuring tape to set up the cones for the figure 8 cone drill. And finally, you need Smart Cart brand cannabis oil, a sativa strain. We're going to use 10 milligrams for consumption. Description of exercise strength and push-ups. I think everybody knows how to do push-ups, and I think the important things to remember is to keep the body straight, as in a plank style. The arms could be at a 45-degree angle from the body, and you want to keep your head up. What we're counting is full push-ups, all the way down so the chest hits the floor and all the way up. Description of the endurance test, wall squatting. Participants want to stand with their feet shoulder width apart and approximately 2 feet from the wall, and with their back up against the wall, they want to slide down until they're almost at a sitting position. Their upper thigh should be at approximately a 90-degree angle. Maybe the thigh should be parallel with the floor. Where they put their hands really doesn't matter. They could put their hands up in the air, as some people like to do, or they could place them on their knees. However, this test should start as soon as they reach this position, and it should end when the participant can no longer hold this position. The speed and agility figure 8 cone drill test. Right here we have a depiction of how we do this test. So instead of giving you a truncated version, I'm going to go ahead and read it out, since many people don't know the intricacies of this cone drill. So 2 cones are placed 10 meters apart. There's a start and finish line should be near one of the cones. And what happens is that the subject starts at one cone, okay, and they start to run around one, and in a figure 8, they go around the other, turn back again, run around the other cone, and start there. So as soon as the participant starts running, we start it. Whenever they finish going back to the point where they started, that'll be where they end, and then we're going to stop the time there. I believe that all participants should get 1 trial run, because many people haven't done this before. They should get 1 trial run to understand the intricacies of this drill. Explanation of the procedure. So in the first phase, what we're going to do is going to be on day 1, and we're going to have all 3 participants do the strength test, the endurance test, and the speed and agility test on day 1 without consuming any marijuana. And then we're going to record the results. The second phase will take place on day 2, where we're going to have the participants consume 10 milligrams of marijuana, wait 15 minutes, and then perform the strength test, the endurance test, and the speed and agility test. The results from both days will be compared to see if there is an increase or decrease in each of the athletes' athletic performance. If the athletes perform worse on the second day, then the hypothesis that the marijuana consumption adversely affects short-term athletic performance will be confirmed. Findings: the push-up strength test. So you can see on day 1, these are the results, and on day 2, these are the results. And over here we have the overall performance with an increase or decrease. So DC had an increase of 1, JL had a decrease of push-ups of 1, and BC did the same exact push-ups in day 1 and day 2. Therefore, there was no significant difference between day 1 and 2, and I could say that there was no difference in strength. The sitting wall squat endurance test. As stated before, the sitting wall test should be done until exhaustion. We have the times for day 1 versus the times in day 2, and the change in overall performance. So as you can see here, DC was able to perform for 1 second longer, JL performed for 5 seconds less, and BC performed for 1 second less. So I believe that there is no significant difference between day 1 and day 2 of the endurance test. As a side note, JL said that she did a leg workout earlier in the day on day 2, and that contributed a little bit to her leg fatigue during the endurance test. Finally, the figure 8 cone drill agility test. For this test, there's a significant difference between day 1 and day 2. The agility and speed tests on day 2 were much lower. As you see here, there's a big difference for DC, JL, and BC from day 1 to day 2. On day 2, there's a decrease in time for completing the figure 8 cone drill test. DC did it for 1 second and 1.07 seconds less. JL did it for half a second less, and BC did it for almost 60.62 seconds less. And in any type of test that considered running, these time differences are quite significant. Conclusion: the result of the experiment confirmed the hypothesis that performing exercise or athletic events shortly after consuming marijuana will cause adverse effects on short-term athletic performance. There was no significant change in the strength or the endurance of the athletes from day 1 to day 2. Therefore, in this experiment, the consumption of marijuana did not have any short-term effects on strength or endurance. However, based on the figure 8 cone drill test, there was a sharp drop in the completion time from day 1 to day 2. This means that the agility and speed of the participants was greatly affected by consuming marijuana 15 minutes before their athletic performance. What the times don't show you is being able to watch the participants perform the figure 8 cone drill test. In the straightaway portion of the test, where the participants just had to run straight and fast, they all performed well and in the same manner that they did on day 1. However, when it came to the agility and coordination part, where they have to turn around and make these sharp turns around the cones, this is where each of the athletes faltered. The science corroborates for the results. Studies have shown that cannabinoid receptors in the basal ganglia cerebellum are associated with movement control and might be affected by marijuana consumption. Additionally, there's also receptors in the spinal cord, and that could cause a slowdown of the participants' reflexes as well. Therefore, just to summarize the results, the experiment confirmed the hypothesis. Performing exercise or athletic events shortly after consuming marijuana will cause adverse effects on short-term athletic performance. Thank you.